I was on this solo adventure, exploring this remote island that seemed untouched by civilization. I mean, it was beautiful, with lush jungles and pristine beaches stretching as far as the eye could see. But then, as I was hiking through the dense foliage, I stumbled upon something that sent chills down my spine. I mean, it was this secluded community, hidden away from the rest of the world. At first, I thought it was just a small village, with friendly locals going about their daily lives. But then, I started to notice things that didn't quite add up. I mean, the people seemed distant, almost detached from reality. And there was this eerie vibe hanging in the air, like something dark and sinister lurked just beneath the surface. But the strangest thing of all was their leader, this charismatic figure who seemed to have an iron grip on the community. I mean, he had this way of speaking that was mesmerizing, almost hypnotic. And the more time I spent around him, the more I started to realize just how dangerous he really was. I mean, he had this twisted ideology, this belief that he was some kind of chosen one, destined to lead his followers to enlightenment. But it was all just a facade, a mask hiding the true darkness that lay beneath. And I knew that if I didn't get out of there soon, I would become trapped in his web of lies and manipulation. So, I started looking for a way to escape, to get off the island before it was too late. I mean, it wasn't easy, with the cult members watching my every move, but I was determined to find a way out. And then, just when I was about to lose hope, I stumbled upon a hidden path leading away from the community. I mean, it was like a sign, a chance to finally break free from the cult's clutches. I knew I had to act fast, before they realized what I was doing and tried to stop me. So, I gathered up what supplies I could and set off down the path, hoping against hope that it would lead me to safety. But the journey was treacherous, with obstacles at every turn and danger lurking around every corner. I had to stay alert, to keep my wits about me if I wanted to make it out alive. And just when I thought I couldn't go on, I spotted a boat on the horizon, a glimmer of hope in the darkness. It was my ticket to freedom, my chance to leave the island behind and never look back. So, I pushed forward, ignoring the pain and exhaustion as I raced towards the shore. And when I finally reached the boat, I collapsed on deck, tears of relief streaming down my face. It was over. I had escaped the clutches of the cult and lived to tell the tale. I was on this vacation, just trying to relax and enjoy some time away from the daily grind. But then, out of nowhere, this powerful tropical storm hit the coast, and things went from bad to worse in a matter of minutes. The wind was howling, and the rain was coming down in sheets. And before I knew it, the streets were flooded, and everything was chaos. I knew I had to find shelter, fast, before things get even worse. So, I started looking for a safe place to ride out the storm, somewhere high enough to avoid the floodwaters. But as I made my way through the town, I couldn't shake this feeling of dread, like I was being watched, It was like there were eyes on me from every direction. And then, just when I thought things couldn't get any worse, I stumbled upon a group of looters, taking advantage of the chaos to ransack the town. It was like something out of a nightmare. I knew I had to get away from them, before they spotted me and decided to target me next. So, I ducked into this abandoned building, hoping to find some shelter from the storm. But as I huddled there in the darkness, I couldn't shake this feeling of unease, like I wasn't alone in the building. It was like there was something lurking in the shadows, just waiting for the right moment to strike. And then, just as I was about to lose hope, I heard this noise coming from the other end of the building, like footsteps echoing through the empty halls. My heart was pounding in my chest as I listened, trying to figure out what was out there. I knew I had to be careful. Whoever it was could be dangerous. So, I crept through the building, trying to stay as quiet as possible, hoping against hope that I wouldn't be discovered. But then, just when I thought I was safe, I heard this voice calling out to me from the darkness. I mean, it was this low, guttural sound that sent shivers down my spine. I knew I had to get out of there, fast, before whatever was out there found me. So, I made a run for it, dodging debris and navigating through the flooded streets, hoping to find some way to escape the storm. And then, just when I thought all hope was lost, I spotted this rescue team coming down the street, their lights cutting through the darkness like beacons of hope. It was like a miracle, seeing them there in the midst of all the chaos. I waved them down, shouting for help, and they came to my rescue, pulling me to safety and taking me to a shelter where I could wait out the rest of the storm. It was a close call, but I made it out alive, thanks to the quick thinking of those rescue workers. I was working my shift at the resort hotel, just doing my usual rounds and keeping an eye on things. But then, out of nowhere, I saw something that sent chills down my spine. There was this guest in the pool, flailing around and struggling to stay afloat. And at first, I thought it was just a normal drowning. Accidents happen sometimes. But then, as I got closer, I noticed something strange. There was no one else around, no one else trying to help. And that's when it hit me. Something wasn't right about the situation. I knew I had to act fast. Every second counted in a situation like this. So, I dove into the pool and pulled the guest out of the water, laying them down on the pool deck. And as I started performing CPR, I couldn't shake this feeling of dread, like there was something sinister going on behind the scenes. It was like I was being watched, But I pushed those thoughts aside and focused on the task at hand, doing everything I could to save the guest's life. It was all I could do in that moment. And then, just when I thought things couldn't get any worse, I heard this noise coming from the other side of the pool, footsteps echoing through the empty space. I knew I had to stay focused. Whoever it was could be the key to figuring out what was really going on. So, I kept performing CPR, trying to ignore the growing sense of unease creeping up my spine. But then, just as I was about to give up hope, I saw them, the other hotel staff, standing there on the other side of the pool, watching me with these cold, dead eyes. It was like something out of a nightmare, seeing them there, lurking in the shadows like that. And that's when I knew this wasn't just an accident, it was something far more sinister. I knew I had to get out of there, fast, before they could stop me or do something even worse. So, I grabbed the guest's phone and called for help, hoping against hope that someone would come to my rescue. And just as I was about to lose hope, I heard the sound of sirens in the distance. The ambulance was on its way. It was like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders, knowing that help was finally on the way. But then, just as quickly as it had come, a feeling of relief vanished, replaced by a sense of urgency. I had to get out of there before the other hotel staff could stop me or do something even worse. So, I grabbed the guest's hand and started pulling them towards the exit, hoping to make it out of there before it was too late. And as we made our way through the hotel, I couldn't shake this feeling of unease, like we were being watched every step of the way. But I pushed those thoughts aside and focused on the task at hand, getting the guest to safety. It was all I could do in that moment. And then, just when I thought we were home free, I heard the sound of footsteps behind us, the other hotel staff, closing in on us fast. I knew I had to act fast. There was no time to waste. So, I grabbed the guest's hand and started running, hoping to outrun our pursuers and make it to safety. And just as it seemed like we were about to be caught, I saw them, the ambulance, waiting for us just up ahead. It was like a beacon of hope in the darkness, guiding us to safety. it was supposed to be a dream vacation, you know, sailing the open seas on a luxurious cruise ship. But then, everything went terribly wrong. It started out innocently enough, you know, just enjoying the sunshine and fresh sea air. But then, rumors started swirling about some sort of illness spreading among the passengers and crew. At first, I didn't pay much attention to it. I mean, it seemed like just another case of the flu going around. But then, people started getting sick, really sick. I mean, it was like something out of a nightmare, seeing all those people laid up in their cabins, coughing and wheezing. And that's when I knew this was no ordinary illness. I knew I had to be careful. I mean, I didn't want to catch whatever it was that was going around. So, I started avoiding crowded areas and washing my hands religiously. But then, just when I thought I was safe, I started feeling sick, really sick. I mean, it hit me like a ton of bricks, this overwhelming sense of fatigue and nausea. I knew I had to act fast. I mean, I couldn't let myself get any worse. So, I made my way to the ship's medical center and told them what was going on. And that's when they told me the truth. I had been infected with the virus that was spreading like wildfire throughout the ship. I knew I had to quarantine myself. I mean, I couldn't risk spreading the illness to anyone else. So, I locked myself in my cabin and waited for help to arrive. But as the days passed, I started feeling worse and worse. I mean, it was like I was slowly being consumed by the illness, my body weakening with every passing hour. I knew I had to get to the medical center. I mean, I needed treatment and I needed it fast. So, I mustered up all the strength I had left and made my way through the deserted halls of the ship. But as I stumbled towards the medical center, I couldn't shake this feeling of dread, like something terrible was waiting for me around every corner. And then, just when I thought things couldn't get any worse, I heard this noise, this guttural, animalistic noise coming from somewhere nearby. I knew I had to keep moving. I mean, I couldn't let myself get distracted by whatever it was that was lurking in the shadows. So, I pressed on, my heart pounding in my chest with every step. But then, just as I was about to reach the medical center, I saw it, this figure, standing there in the hallway, staring at me with these cold, dead eyes. I knew I had to get away from it. I mean, it was like something out of a nightmare, seeing it there like that. So, I turned and ran, my adrenaline fueling me as I sprinted through the ship, desperate to escape. And as I reached the medical center and collapsed through the door, I felt this overwhelming sense of relief wash over me. I mean, I had made it. I had reached safety. But as the doctors started treating me, I couldn't shake this feeling of unease, like I was still in danger, like the nightmare was far from over. I knew I had to stay strong. I mean, I couldn't let fear consume me. So, I closed my eyes and focused on getting better, hoping against hope that I would make it out of this alive. And as the days passed and I slowly started to recover, I couldn't help but feel grateful to be alive. I mean, it had been a close call, but I had made it out alive, thanks to quick thinking and a little bit of luck. It was supposed to be the adventure of a lifetime, you know, trekking through the dense jungles of our remote location. But then, everything took a terrifying turn. We were deep in the jungle, surrounded by towering trees and the sounds of wildlife all around us. But then, we stumbled upon a group of locals, and they didn't look too happy to see us. At first, I thought maybe they were just curious about us, you know, foreigners wandering through their territory. But then, I saw the way they were looking at us, with hostility and suspicion. I knew we had to tread carefully. I mean, we were outnumbered and far from helpful. So, I tried to approach them with caution, hoping to defuse the situation before it escalated. But as I tried to communicate with them, I could tell they weren't interested in talking. I mean, they were armed and aggressive, making it clear that they saw us as intruders in their land. I knew we were in trouble. I mean, there was no way we could reason with them in our current state. So, we made the decision to retreat, hoping to find safety before things got any worse. But as we tried to make our way back through the jungle, I couldn't shake this feeling of dread, like we were being watched, like they were tracking our every move. And then, just when we thought we had escaped, they attacked. I mean, it was like something out of a nightmare, arrows flying through the air and voices shouting all around us. I knew we had to fight back. I mean, our lives depended on it. So, we did our best to defend ourselves, using whatever makeshift weapons we could find. But as the chaos unfolded around us, I couldn't help but feel this overwhelming sense of despair, like there was no way out of this alive. And then, just when it seemed like all hope was lost, help arrived. I mean, it was like a miracle, seeing reinforcements arrive just in the nick of time to save us from certain death. I knew we had to make a run for it. I mean, we couldn't stay in the jungle any longer. So, we followed our rescuers, sprinting through the dense foliage as fast as our legs could carry us. But as we fled, I couldn't shake this feeling of guilt, like we had brought this upon ourselves by trespassing on their land. And as we finally emerged from the jungle, battered and bruised but alive, I couldn't help but feel relieved. I mean, we had made it out of there in one piece, thanks to quick thinking and a little bit of luck. But as I looked back at the jungle, I couldn't shake this feeling of unease, like we had narrowly escaped a fate worse than death. I never thought parasailing could turn into a nightmare like this. It was supposed to be an exhilarating adventure, you know, soaring high above the ocean with the wind rushing through my hair. But then, everything went horribly wrong. As I was lifted into the air, I felt this rush of excitement coursing through me. I mean, the view from up there was breathtaking, with the endless expanse of the ocean stretching out beneath me. But then, just when I was starting to relax and enjoy the ride, I heard this loud snapping sound, and before I knew it, I was plummeting towards the water below. As I hit the water with a jolt, I felt this overwhelming sense of panic washing over me. I mean, I was disoriented and struggling to catch my breath as the waves crashed over me. But as I tried to swim to the surface, I realized I wasn't alone in the water. I mean, there was something lurking beneath the surface, something sinister and predatory. I knew I had to stay calm and keep my wits about me if I wanted to survive. So, I tried to stay as still as possible, hoping to avoid attracting whatever creature was lurking below. But as the minutes ticked by, I could feel this sense of dread growing inside me. I mean, the water was so murky and dark, making it impossible to see what was lurking just beneath the surface. And then, just when I thought things couldn't get any worse, I felt something brush against my leg. I mean, it was like icy fingers wrapping around me, sending shivers down my spine. I knew I had to act fast if I wanted to survive. So, I mustered up all the strength I had and started swimming towards the surface with everything I had. But as I broke through the surface of the water, I saw it, this massive shape moving towards me with terrifying speed. I mean, it was like something out of a nightmare, with razor-sharp teeth glinting in the sunlight. I knew I had to do something to defend myself. So, I started thrashing around in the water, hoping to scare it away or at least buy myself some time to escape. But as the creature drew closer, I could feel this overwhelming sense of hopelessness washing over me. I mean, there was no way I could fight off something that big and powerful. And then, just when I thought all hope was lost, I heard this loud shout from above. I mean, it was like a lifeline, giving me the strength and courage to keep fighting. I knew I had to keep going. I mean, I couldn't give up now when rescue was so close at hand. So, I kept thrashing around in the water, hoping to attract the attention of whoever was shouting for me. And then, just when I thought I couldn't hold on any longer, I felt this strong hand grab hold of me and start pulling me towards safety. I mean, it was like a miracle, feeling myself being lifted out of the water and onto the safety of the boat above. I knew I had survived. I mean, against all odds, I had made it out of there alive. It was supposed to be a relaxing vacation, a chance to escape from the stress of everyday life and unwind in a lap of luxury. But then, everything took a terrifying turn when I stumbled upon a gruesome discovery that would haunt me for the rest of my days. I remember it vividly, the sun beating down on the pristine beach, the gentle sound of waves crashing against the shore. It was the perfect day, or so I thought. But then, as I walked along the shoreline, enjoying the tranquility of the ocean, I saw something that sent a chill down my spine. There, lying in the sand, was a body, lifeless and still. At first, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I mean, it was like something out of a horror movie, with the waves gently lapping at the feet of the deceased. But as I got closer, I realized the gravity of the situation. I mean, this wasn't just a tragic accident or a natural death. It was murder. I knew I had to do something. I mean, I couldn't just leave the body there to be swept away by the tide. So, I mustered up all the courage I had and approached the resort staff for help. But to my horror, they seemed reluctant to involve the authorities. I mean, they kept insisting that it was just an unfortunate accident and that there was no need to cause a panic among the guests. But deep down, I knew there was more to it than that. I mean, this wasn't just some random act of violence. It was a calculated and deliberate attack. So, I decided to take matters into my own hands. I mean, if the resort staff wouldn't help me, then I would have to find the killer myself. I started by retracing the victim's last known movements, talking to anyone who might have seen or heard something suspicious. I mean, it wasn't easy, but I was determined to uncover the truth. And as I delved deeper into the mystery, I began to uncover a web of lies and deceit that stretched far beyond the confines of the resort. I mean, it was like peeling back the layers of an onion, with each revelation more shocking than the last. But with each step closer to the truth, I could feel this sense of dread growing inside me. I mean, I knew the killer was still out there, lurking in the shadows, waiting to strike again. And then, just when I thought I had finally pieced together the puzzle, I found myself face to face with the killer themselves. I mean, it was like staring into the eyes of pure evil, with no remorse or empathy for the life they had taken. But I refused to back down. I mean, I had come too far to let fear stop me now. So, I confronted the killer head-on, demanding answers and justice for their heinous crime. And as the truth finally came to light, I felt this overwhelming sense of relief wash over me. I mean, justice had been served, and the victim could finally rest in peace. But the experience had changed me forever. I mean, I could never look at the world in the same way again, knowing that darkness lurked just beneath the surface, waiting to strike when least expected. But despite the horrors I had witnessed, I refused to let fear consume me. I mean, I was stronger now, more determined than ever to fight for what was right and ensure that justice prevailed, no matter the cost. So, I'm Jack, right? Just a regular guy who loves a good adventure. Anyway, one day I decided to try something new, so I signed up for a zip-line excursion in the forest. Seemed like a fun way to spend the day, you know? Little did I know, things were about to take a turn for the worse. So there I am, all geared up and ready to go, when suddenly, the zip-line snaps. I mean, it just breaks right in the middle of my ride. Next thing I know, I'm dangling there, high above the forest floor, clinging on for dear life. Talk about a nightmare scenario. Now, I'm not one to panic easily, but let me tell you, fear was coursing through my veins like never before. I am frantically trying to assess the situation, looking for any signs of help or rescue. But all I see is darkness below me, and the sound of my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. As time passes, I start to feel a creeping sense of dread wash over me. I can't shake the feeling that I'm being watched. I mean, I wouldn't feel that way, right? Hanging there like bait, vulnerable and exposed to whatever might be lurking in the shadows below. I try to call out for help, but my voice gets lost in the vastness of the forest. It's like I'm completely alone out there, at the mercy of whoever or whatever might be lurking in the darkness. Hours pass, and I'm still hanging there, growing more and more desperate by the minute. I'm starting to lose hope of ever being rescued, when suddenly, I hear something stirring below. My heart skips a beat as I strain to see what's down there, but it's too dark to make out anything clearly. Then, out of nowhere, I catch a glimpse of movement in the shadows. My blood runs cold as I realize that I'm not alone. Someone, or something, is down there, watching me, waiting for who knows what. I try to stay calm, but fear grips me like a vice. I'm so vulnerable up here, just dangling in the breeze, with no way to defend myself against whatever might be lurking below. Suddenly, I hear voices calling out to me from the forest floor. It's the rescue team, finally coming to save me. Relief floods through me as I see them approaching, but my joy is short-lived when I realize that the figure in the shadows is still there, watching, waiting. With the help of the rescue team, I'm finally lowered safely to the ground. I stumble forward, weak and shaken, but alive. As I look back up at the broken zipline dangling above me, I can't help but shudder at the thought of what might have happened if help hadn't arrived in time. I'm grateful to be alive, but I can't shake the feeling that I escaped something truly sinister up there in the forest canopy. Who, or what, was watching me from the shadows? And what were their intentions? I may never know for sure, but one thing's for certain. I'll think twice before signing up for another zipline excursion again. The first thing I noticed when we entered the cave was the oppressive darkness that seemed to swallow everything in its path. The only thing keeping the shadows at bay was the feeble beam of my flashlight, flickering weakly against the cold stone walls. But then, without warning, the light went out, leaving me plunged into total darkness. Panic gripped me as I fumbled with the flashlight, desperately trying to coax it back to life. But no matter how many times I pressed the switch, it remained stubbornly dark. I called out to my group, but my voice seemed to get swallowed up by the vast emptiness of the cave. I was alone, stranded in the darkness with no way of knowing which way to go. I stood there for what felt like hours, my heart pounding in my chest as I strained my ears for any sign of life. But all I could hear was the eerie silence of the cave, broken only by the sound of my own breathing. And then, just when I thought things couldn't get any worse, I heard it, a soft whisper, barely audible above the sound of my own heartbeat. It was like someone was speaking directly into my ear, their words sending shivers down my spine. I tried to tell myself it was just my imagination, that the darkness was playing tricks on my mind. But deep down, I knew there was something more sinister at play. I began to move, my footsteps echoing up the walls as I groped blindly in the darkness. I didn't know where I was going, only that I had to keep moving if I wanted to have any chance of finding my way out. But the whispers followed me, growing louder and more insistent with each step I took. It was like they were taunting me, mocking my attempts to escape their clutches. I tried to block them out, to focus on finding my way back to the surface. But no matter how hard I tried, they were always there, lurking just beyond the edge of my consciousness. And then, just when I thought I couldn't take it anymore, I saw a glimmer of light up ahead. It was faint at first, barely visible against the darkness of the cave. But as I drew closer, it grew brighter, illuminating the path ahead. With renewed hope, I quickened my pace, eager to escape the oppressive darkness that had engulfed me for so long. But just as I reached the source of the light, I froze in horror. Standing before me was a figure, cloaked in shadow, their features obscured by the dim glow of a flashlight. I tried to speak, to ask for help, but the words caught in my throat. The figure beckoned to me, their hand outstretched in a silent invitation. And as I stared into the darkness, I felt this overwhelming sense of dread wash over me. But then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, the figure vanished, leaving me alone in the darkness once again. I stood there for a moment, trying to catch my breath, before turning and running as fast as I could in the opposite direction. I didn't stop until I reached the surface, my heart pounding in my chest as I gulped in the fresh air. I was safe, for now at least, but I knew I would never forget the horrors I had witnessed in the depths of that cave. As I made my way back to the safety of my group, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still out there, lurking in the darkness, waiting for its next victim. And as I looked back at the cave entrance, I vowed never to return to that cursed place again. I was out on the cliffs, camera in hand, trying to capture the perfect shot of the rugged coastline below. The sun was setting, casting a warm glow over the ocean, and I was so focused on getting the perfect shot that I didn't notice the loose gravel beneath my feet. Suddenly, I felt myself slipping, my feet unable to find purchase on the unstable ground. I tried to grab onto something, anything, to stop myself from falling, but it was too late. With a sickening march, I tumbled over the edge of the cliff, my camera slipping from my grasp as I plummeted towards the jagged rocks below. The fall seemed to last forever, the wind rushing past my ears as I hurtled towards the ground. I closed my eyes, bracing myself for the impact, but when it came, it was almost mercifully quick. I hit the rocks with a bone-jarring thud, pain shooting through my body as I lay there, dazed and disoriented. I tried to move, to get up and assess the damage, but every movement sent waves of agony rippling through me. I lay there for what felt like hours, the sound of the crashing waves echoing in my ears as I struggled to catch my breath. But as the minutes passed, I realized something even more terrifying. The tide was coming in, and fast. I tried to scramble to my feet, desperate to get to higher ground before the water reached me, but my injuries were too severe. I could only watch in horror as the water crept closer and closer, inching its way up the rocky shore towards me. I knew I had to do something, anything, to signal for help before it was too late. I glanced around, searching desperately for anything that could help me get the attention of passing boats or hikers on the cliffs above. And then I saw it, a piece of driftwood, washed up on the rocks just a few feet away. With a surge of adrenaline, I dragged myself towards it, ignoring the pain in my limbs as I reached out and grabbed hold of it with trembling hands. I used all of my remaining strength to hoist the driftwood into the air, waving it frantically in the hopes that someone, anyone, would see me and come to my rescue. But as I scanned the horizon, I realized with growing despair that there was no one around for miles. The water was getting closer now, lapping at my feet as I lay there, helpless and alone. I could feel the panic rising inside me, threatening to overwhelm me as I struggled to come to terms with the fact that I might not make it out of this alive. But then, just when I thought all hope was lost, I heard it, the sound of an approaching boat, its engine cutting through the stillness of the evening air. I cried out with relief, my voice hoarse from screaming for help, as I waved the driftwood with all the strength I could muster. The boat drew closer, its lights cutting through the darkness as it made its way towards me. I could hardly believe it. Help was finally on the way, and I was going to make it out of this alive. As the boat pulled up alongside me, the crew threw down a rope ladder, and I grabbed hold of it with trembling hands, hauling myself up onto the deck with the last of my strength. I collapsed onto the hard wooden planks, tears streaming down my face as I realized just how close I had come to losing everything. But as the boat sped away from the shore, carrying me to safety, I knew that I would never forget the terror of that moment, the fear of being stranded and alone, with no one to hear my cries for help. And as I looked back at the cliffs disappearing into the distance, I silently vowed never to take risks like that again. I arrived at the Airbnb, excited to start my vacation. The host seemed friendly enough, showing me around the place and giving me tips on where to go in the area. But as I settled in, I started to notice some strange things. There were locked doors in the house that the host said were off limits, which seemed odd to me. And then I found a box hidden in the back of a closet, filled with what looked like passports and IDs. My heart raced as I realized that something was seriously wrong. I didn't know what to do. Should I confront the host and risk angering them? Or should I try to leave quietly and find somewhere else to stay? I felt like I was trapped in a nightmare, unsure of who I could trust. I decided to try and gather more evidence before making any decisions. I searched the house for anything else that seemed suspicious, careful to leave everything exactly as I found it so as not to arouse suspicion. As I rummaged for drawers and cabinets, I stumbled upon a locked safe hidden in the host's bedroom. My hand shook as I tried to figure out the combination, my mind racing with thoughts of what could be inside. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, I managed to crack the code and open the safe. My heart sank as I saw what was inside, stacks of cash, along with bags of what looked like drugs. I knew I had to get out of there, and fast. I quietly packed my bags, trying to stay calm as I made my way to the door. But just as I reached for the handle, I heard footsteps coming up the stairs. Panic surged through me as I realized that the host was coming back. I looked around frantically, searching for a way out, but there was nowhere to hide. I was trapped, with nowhere to run. The door swung open, and the host stood there, a smile plastered on their face. But behind their smile, I could see something dark and menacing lurking in their eyes. They asked me what I was doing, why I was packing my bags. I tried to come up with an excuse, but my voice caught in my throat. I knew I had to think fast if I wanted to get out of there alive. I told them I was feeling sick and needed to leave, hoping they would buy my lie. But they just laughed, a cold, humorless sound that sent shivers down my spine. They moved closer, blocking my path to the door. I could smell the alcohol on their breath, mingling with the scent of something else, something metallic and sharp. I knew then that I was in real danger. I had to get out of there, no matter what it took. With a burst of adrenaline, I pushed past the host and sprinted down the stairs, ignoring their shouts behind me. I reached the front door and flung it open, stumbling out into the night. I didn't stop running until I was miles away, safe from whatever horrors lurked inside the house. As I caught my breath, I realized just how close I had come to becoming another victim of whatever twisted game the host was playing. But I had escaped, and that's all that mattered. I vowed never to stay in an Airbnb again, to always trust my instincts and listen to that voice inside me that tells me when something isn't right. And as I made my way to a nearby hotel, I promised myself that I would never forget the terror of that night and the narrow escape that had saved my life. I was driving along a deserted stretch of road, enjoying the solitude of my backpacking trip, when I saw someone hitchhiking up ahead. I've always been the kind of guy who likes to help out a stranger, so I pulled over and offered them a ride. At first, everything seemed normal. We exchanged pleasantries, and they seemed grateful for the lift. But as we continued on our journey, I started to notice some things that didn't quite add up. They kept glancing over at me, their eyes lingering just a little too long, and there was something off about the way they spoke, like they were hiding something. My gut told me that I should be wary, but I brushed it off as paranoia. But then things took a turn for the worse. They started asking me strange questions, like where I was headed and if I was traveling alone. I tried to laugh it off, but their intensity sent a chill down my spine. I started to feel trapped, like I was stuck in a car with a total stranger who might not have my best interests at heart. I considered pulling over and kicking them out, but I didn't want to escalate the situation any further. As we drove on, their behavior became increasingly erratic. They would suddenly change the subject or stare out the window in silence for long stretches of time. It was like they were toying with me, enjoying my discomfort. I knew I had to get out of there, but I didn't know how. I couldn't just kick them out of the car in the middle of nowhere, and I didn't want to provoke them into doing something even more dangerous. I tried to keep my cool, to act like everything was fine, but inside I was panicking. I kept thinking about all the horror stories I'd heard about hitchhikers gone wrong, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was living one of those stories right now. Finally, after what felt like hours of tension-filled silence, we reached a small town. I pulled over to the side of the road and told them I needed to stretch my legs and use the restroom. It was a feeble excuse, but it was the best I could come up with in the moment. As soon as they got out of the car, I locked the doors and sped up down the road, not looking back until I was miles away. I felt a rush of relief as I realized that I was finally free from their grasp. But as I drove on, I couldn't shake the feeling that they were still out there, somewhere, waiting for their next unsuspecting victim. And as I glanced in the rearview mirror, I saw something that chilled me to the bone, a figure standing by the side of the road, watching me with cold, unblinking eyes. I was on a solo trip, exploring a new city, and I decided to stay in a hostel to save some money. It seemed like a decent place, clean, affordable, with good reviews online. But as soon as I met my roommate, I knew something was off. She had this wild look in her eyes, like she was constantly on edge, and she seemed to be muttering to herself under her breath. At first, I tried to give her the benefit of the doubt, but as the night went on, her behavior only got stranger. She would pace around the room, checking the windows and door over and over again, like she was afraid someone was going to break in. And every time I tried to talk to her, she would snap at me, like she was ready to lash out at any moment. I tried to ignore her and focus on my own business, but it was hard to relax knowing that she was in the same room as me. I kept my phone close at hand, just in case I needed to call for help. As the night wore on, I found it harder and harder to sleep. Every little noise made me jump, and I couldn't shake the feeling that she was watching me, waiting for me to let my guard down. Finally, unable to take it anymore, I decided to confront her. I asked her what was wrong, if there was anything I could do to help. But instead of answering me, she just laughed, a cold, hollow sound that sent shivers down my spine. I knew then that I needed to get out of there, but I didn't know how. The door was locked, and I didn't want to risk trying to leave while she was still awake and alert. So I lay there in the darkness, listening to her pacing back and forth, counting down the minutes until morning. It felt like an eternity before the first light of dawn filtered through the curtains, and I wasted no time unpacking my bags and getting out of there. As I left the hostel behind, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease that had settled over me. I didn't know what was wrong with my roommate, or what she might have been capable of, but I was just grateful to be out of her reach. I was out camping, deep in the wilderness, looking forward to some peace and quiet away from the hustle and bustle of city life. It was just me in the great outdoors, or so I thought. As night fell and I settled into my tent, I heard rustling in the bushes nearby. At first, I didn't think much of it, probably just some animals scavenging for food. But then the rustling got louder, closer, and I started to feel uneasy. I grabbed my flashlight and cautiously stepped outside to investigate. That's when I saw them, a group of men, lurking in the shadows, eyeing me with suspicion and hostility. I froze, unsure of what to do next. They started shouting at me, accusing me of trespassing on their land. I tried to reason with them, to explain that I was just here to enjoy nature, but they weren't interested in listening. They were angry, aggressive, and I could see that things were quickly escalating out of control. I knew I needed to get out of there, and fast. I didn't stand a chance against a group of armed men in the middle of nowhere. I scrambled back to my tent, packed up my things as quickly as I could, and fled into the darkness. But they were hot on my heels, chasing me through the trees, their shouts echoing in the night. I ran as fast as my legs would carry me, my heart pounding in my chest, adrenaline coursing through my veins. I stumbled over roots and rocks, branches clawing at my face. I didn't dare stop. I couldn't afford to. I needed to keep moving, to put as much distance between me and them as possible. Somehow, by some stroke of luck or divine intervention, I managed to lose them in the dense undergrowth. I collapsed to the ground, gasping for breath, my whole body trembling with fear and exhaustion. I lay there for what felt like hours, listening for any sign of pursuit, but all I heard was the sound of my own ragged breathing and the distant call of nocturnal creatures. When I finally mustered the strength to move again, I realized that I had no idea where I was. I was lost, disoriented, and utterly alone in the wilderness. But I couldn't afford to panic. I needed to stay calm, to think rationally, to find my way back to safety. So I picked myself up, dusted myself off, and set off into the unknown, praying that I would find help before it was too late. Hours passed, maybe even days. I couldn't be sure. Time seemed to lose all meaning as I trudged through the wilderness, my mind consumed by fear and uncertainty. But just when I was starting to lose hope, I stumbled upon a familiar landmark, a trail marker, indicating that I was on the right path back to civilization. Relief flooded through me, but I knew I wasn't out of the woods yet, both literally and figuratively. I still had a long journey ahead of me, fraught with danger and uncertainty, but at least now I had a fighting chance. With newfound determination, I pressed on, putting one foot in front of the other, until at long last, I emerged from the wilderness and into the light of day. I collapsed to the ground, exhausted but alive, grateful for every breath I took and every beat of my heart. And as I lay there, surrounded by the sights and sounds of civilization, I vowed never to take another moment for granted, to cherish every precious second of life that I had been given. I'm Sarah, just an ordinary woman who loves to travel and explore new places. So, I decided to embark on an adventure abroad, eager to experience different cultures and make unforgettable memories. Little did I know, my journey would take a terrifying turn that I never could have imagined. It all started when I found myself in the wrong place at the wrong time. I was falsely accused of a crime I didn't commit and arrested by the local authorities. Suddenly, my dream vacation turned into a nightmare as I was thrown into a foreign prison, stripped of my freedom and dignity. The prison was like something out of a nightmare, dark, dirty, and filled with dangerous criminals. The guards were corrupt and cruel, showing no mercy to those trapped within the walls of their oppressive regime. I was terrified, but I knew I had to stay strong and fight for my innocence. I couldn't let them break me, no matter what they threw at me. So, I banded together with my fellow prisoners, forming alliances and watching each other's backs as we navigated the harsh realities of prison life. Every day was a struggle to survive, to find enough food to eat, to avoid the wrath of the guards, to keep hope alive in the face of despair. But I refused to give up, clinging to the belief that one day, justice would prevail and I would be set free. As the days turned into weeks, and the weeks turned into months, I never lost sight of my goal. I worked tirelessly to gather evidence and build my case, determined to prove my innocence and secure my freedom. But the road to justice was long and fraught with danger. I faced countless obstacles and setbacks along the way, from corrupt officials to violent inmates. Yet, through it all, I never wavered in my determination to clear my name and reclaim my life. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, my perseverance paid off. With the help of a dedicated legal team and the support of my fellow prisoners, I was able to uncover the truth and expose the real criminals behind the false accusations. The moment I walked out of those prison gates, free at last, was the most incredible feeling in the world. I was battered and bruised, both physically and emotionally, but I was alive, and that was all that mattered. My experience in that foreign prison was a living nightmare, one that I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy. But it also taught me the true meaning of resilience and strength, and for that, I am grateful. Now, as I look back on my ordeal, I know that I am stronger than I ever thought possible, and that I can overcome anything life throws my way. It was supposed to be a solo hike, just me and the great outdoors. I mean, I'd done plenty of hikes before, so I wasn't too worried about getting lost or anything. But then I made a stupid decision. I saw this trail that looked interesting and decided to veer off the designated path. I thought I could handle it, you know? Turns out, I was way in over my head. The terrain was rough, and there were all these thick bushes and trees blocking my way. I couldn't see more than a few feet in front of me. And then, to make matters worse, night started to fall. It happened so fast, I didn't even realize how late it was getting. I tried to stay calm. Panicking wasn't going to help me find my way back. So, I took a deep breath and tried to remember what I'd learned about navigating in the wilderness. But then, I started to feel this weird sensation, like someone was watching me. It made my skin crawl, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone out there. I tried to tell myself it was just my imagination. I was in the middle of nowhere, so who could possibly be watching me? But the feeling only got stronger as I kept walking. Every rustle of the bushes and every crack of a twig made me jump out of my skin. I tried to walk faster. I just wanted to get out of there as soon as possible. But the faster I walked, the more lost I seemed to get. And then, just when I thought things couldn't get any worse, I heard this strange noise coming from somewhere nearby. It sounded like footsteps, but they were so faint I could barely hear them over the sound of my own heartbeat. I froze. Who could possibly be out there with me? I didn't see anyone else on the trail, so where were these footsteps coming from? I tried to convince myself it was just an animal. There were plenty of critters out there in the wilderness. But something about the sound just didn't sit right with me. I started to feel this sense of dread creeping over me. I couldn't shake the feeling that something bad was about to happen. I tried to keep moving. I had to find my way back to safety. But every step I took felt heavier than the last, and I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. And then, just when I thought things couldn't get any worse, I heard a voice. It was faint, but it was definitely there. I stopped dead in my tracks. Who could possibly be out there in the middle of nowhere? And why were they talking to me? I tried to call out and ask if anyone was there, but my voice came out in a whisper. I was too scared to make any noise. The voice kept getting closer and closer, and I could feel the hairs on the back of my neck standing on end. I was terrified, but I didn't know what else to do. And then, just when I thought I couldn't take it anymore, I saw a light in the distance. It was faint, but it was definitely there. I mustered up all the courage I had left and started to run towards it. I didn't care what was out there in the darkness. I just wanted to get away from it as fast as possible. As I got closer to the light, I could see that it was coming from a campsite. It was like a beacon of hope in the middle of all that darkness. I stumbled into the campsite and collapsed on the ground, completely exhausted. I was shaking like a leaf, but I was so relieved to be out of the woods. The people at the campsite were kind enough to let me stay with them for the night. I don't know what would have happened if they hadn't been there. The next morning, they helped me find my way back to the main trail, and I was able to make it back to civilization in one piece. It was the scariest experience of my life, but I was just grateful to be alive. I'm not one to scare easily, but what happened to me while I was renting a cabin in the woods still gives me chills to this day. It all started when I arrived at the cabin, excited for a weekend getaway from the hustle and bustle of city life. The cabin was secluded, nestled deep in the woods, surrounded by towering trees and the sounds of nature. It seemed like the perfect place to relax and unwind, but little did I know, things were about to take a terrifying turn. As I was unpacking my things, I noticed something strange, a small camera hidden among the branches of a tree just outside the window. At first, I thought maybe it was a wildlife camera or something like that, but the more I looked around, the more cameras I found. They were everywhere, hidden in the trees, disguised as rocks, even mounted on the walls of the cabin itself. My heart started to race as I realized that someone had been watching me, spying on my every move. I felt violated, like my privacy had been completely stripped away. Who would do something like this? And why? I knew I had to do something about it, so I started to search the cabin for any clues that might lead me to the person behind the cameras. I combed through every inch of the place, but there was nothing, no notes, no messages, nothing to indicate who the voyeur might be. I felt like I was being watched every second, like someone was lurking just out of sight, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Every noise made me jump, every shadow made my heart skip a beat. I tried to stay calm, to tell myself that it was just paranoia, but deep down, I knew that something wasn't right. And then, just when I thought things couldn't get any worse, they did. Late one night, as I was lying in bed, I heard footsteps outside the cabin. At first, I tried to convince myself that it was just an animal, but the footsteps sounded too deliberate, too purposeful. I crept to the window and peeked outside, my heart pounding in my chest. What I saw made my blood run cold, a figure standing in the shadows, watching the cabin with an intensity that sent shivers down my spine. I didn't know what to do. I felt trapped, like there was nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. All I could do was wait and hope that whoever it was would go away. But they didn't. Instead, they just stood there, staring at the cabin with those cold, unblinking eyes. I felt like a cornered animal, helpless and alone. I knew I had to do something, so I grabbed a flashlight and ventured outside, my heart racing with fear. I called out into the darkness, demanding to know who was there, but there was no response. I searched the area around the cabin, shining my flashlight into every shadow, but there was no sign of anyone. It was like they had vanished into thin air. I returned to the cabin, feeling more terrified than ever. Who was this person, and what did they want from me? I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being targeted, that I was in real danger. I spent the rest of the night wide awake, listening for any sign of the intruder. But the only sound was the pounding of my own heart, echoing in the silence of the woods. When morning finally came, I wasted no time packing up my things and getting out of there. I didn't stop until I was miles away from the cabin, safe and sound in the comfort of civilization. It was supposed to be a perfect day for surfing, just me, the waves, and the sun shining down on me. But things took a turn for the worse pretty quickly. I paddled out into the water, feeling the thrill of the waves beneath me. I mean, there's nothing quite like the feeling of catching a wave just right. But then, out of nowhere, I got caught in a rip current. I mean, it happened so fast, I didn't even realize what was going on until it was too late. I tried to stay calm. Panicking wasn't going to help me get out of the situation. So, I focused on trying to swim parallel to the shore, hoping to break free from the current. But no matter how hard I swam, it felt like the current was pulling me further and further out to sea. It was like I was stuck in this never-ending cycle of struggle. And then, just when I thought things couldn't get any worse, I noticed something out of the corner of my eye. It was a shadowy figure, standing on the shore, watching me. I froze. Who could possibly be out there, watching me struggle in the water? I couldn't make out any details from where I was, but the sight of someone just standing there, watching me, sent shivers down my spine. I tried to call out for help. Maybe whoever it was could lend a hand. But my voice was drowned out by the sound of the crashing waves, and I couldn't tell if they even heard me. I felt this overwhelming sense of dread wash over me. I was all alone out here, with no one to help me. And the thought of that figure watching me from the shore only made things worse. I tried to keep swimming. I had to keep fighting if I wanted to make it out of this alive. But every stroke I took felt weaker than the last, and I could feel myself starting to tire out. I glanced back towards the shore, hoping to catch another glimpse of the figure and maybe get some answers. But they were gone, disappeared into the shadows like they were never there in the first place. I shook my head. Maybe I was just seeing things. Maybe it was just my mind playing tricks on me. But deep down, I knew that wasn't the case. I kept swimming. I had to keep going if I wanted to survive. And eventually, after what felt like hours of struggling, I finally felt the grip of the current loosen its hold on me. I paddled towards the shore as fast as I could. I didn't want to take any chances of getting caught in that current again. And when I finally reached the safety of the beach, I collapsed on the sand, completely exhausted. I lay there for what felt like hours, trying to catch my breath and process what had just happened. It was like something out of a nightmare, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. But eventually, I managed to pull myself together and make my way back to my car. I couldn't get out of there fast enough. It was supposed to be an adventure, exploring a foreign city on my own. But little did I know, I was about to fall into a nightmare that I never saw coming. As I wandered the bustling streets, taking in the sights and sounds of the city, I was approached by a group of locals who seemed friendly enough. They struck up a conversation, offering to show me around and give me the inside scoop on all the best places to visit. At first, I was grateful for their hospitality, eager to experience the city like a local. But as we walked, I started to notice that something wasn't quite right. The streets grew quieter, the buildings more rundown, and I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. I tried to make excuses to leave, but the locals were persistent, urging me to follow them deeper into the maze of alleyways and back streets. That's when I realized I had made a grave mistake. I had fallen right into their trap. Before I knew it, we were surrounded by a group of menacing figures, their faces twisted into cruel smiles. It became clear that this was no friendly tour. It was a setup, a ploy to lure unsuspecting tourists into their clutches. I felt a surge of fear wash over me as I realized the danger I was in. These people were not my friends. They were predators, preying on the naive and the unsuspecting. I knew I had to get out of there, but I was trapped, surrounded on all sides by hostile strangers. I tried to reason with them, to plead for my freedom, but they only laughed in response, taunting me with cruel words and menacing gestures. I felt a sinking feeling in the pit of my stomach as I realized that I was completely at their mercy. There was no one to help me, no one to come to my rescue. I was alone, vulnerable, and utterly terrified. But even in the face of overwhelming odds, I refused to give up hope. I knew that if I wanted to survive, I had to keep my wits about me, to stay one step ahead of my captors. As they led me deeper into the labyrinth of alleyways, I searched desperately for any opportunity to escape. And then, just when it seemed like all hope was lost, I saw it, a narrow gap between two buildings, just wide enough for me to slip through. Without hesitation, I broke into a run, darting through the gap and into the safety of the crowded streets beyond. I didn't stop until I was miles away from the danger, my heart pounding in my chest and my breath coming in ragged gasps. It was only then that I allowed myself to breathe a sigh of relief, knowing that I had narrowly escaped a fate worse than death. But even as I walked away from the scene, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, that my every move was being monitored by those who had tried to ensnare me. I vowed never to let my guard down again, to always be wary of the dangers that lurked in the shadows. And though the memory of that terrifying encounter still haunts me to this day, I know that I'm stronger for having survived it. The beach bonfire was crackling, casting flickering shadows on the sand around us. We were all having a good time, laughing and chatting, enjoying the warmth of the fire on a cool summer night. But then, out of the corner of my eye, I noticed something strange. There were symbols drawn in the sand nearby, intricate patterns that seemed to glow in the firelight. I pointed them out to my friends, and we all gathered around to take a closer look. I mean, it was weird. Who would go to all the trouble of drawing these symbols out here on the beach? We tried to brush it off. I mean, maybe it was just some kids messing around. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something off about those symbols. As the night wore on, things started to feel different. I mean, it's hard to explain, but there was this tension in the air, like we were being watched. I glanced around nervously, but I couldn't see anything out of the ordinary. Still, the feeling persisted, growing stronger with each passing minute. And then, just when I thought things couldn't get any weirder, I noticed movement in the shadows. I mean, it was subtle at first, just a flicker of movement out of the corner of my eye. But when I looked closer, I saw them. Figures lurking in the darkness beyond the reach of the firelight. I couldn't make out any details, just their silhouettes against the night sky. I felt a chill run down my spine. I mean, who were these people, and what were they doing out here in the middle of the night? I whispered to my friends, telling them what I'd seen. I mean, maybe it was just my imagination. I didn't want to take any chances. We all huddled closer together, watching the shadows for any sign of movement. I mean, we were scared, but we were also determined to figure out what was going on. And then, out of nowhere, one of the figures stepped forward into the firelight. I mean, I'll never forget the sight of them, their faces hidden beneath hoods, their eyes gleaming in the darkness. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. I mean, what did they want from us? Were we in danger? But before we could react, another figure stepped forward, and then another. I mean, they were surrounding us, cutting off any chance of escape. I glanced around desperately, searching for some way out of this nightmare. But the beach stretched out before us, empty and desolate, with no sign of help anywhere in sight. I felt a hand on my shoulder, and I turned to see one of my friends looking at me with wide eyes. I mean, we both knew that we were in serious trouble. But then, just when things seemed their darkest, we heard voices in the distance. I mean, it was faint at first, but it grew louder and louder with each passing second. We all turned towards the sound, hope blossoming in our hearts. I mean, maybe it was someone coming to rescue us, someone who could help us get out of this mess. And then, out of the darkness, came a group of people. I mean, they were strangers to us, but in that moment, they were our salvation. They chased off the figures, shouting and yelling until they disappeared into the night. I mean, we were safe, but we were also shaken to our core by what had just happened. We thanked our rescuers profusely. I mean, we couldn't have made it out of there without them. And as we made our way back to our cars, I couldn't help but glance back at the beach one last time. I mean, it was like something out of a nightmare, the fire still burning brightly against the dark sky, the symbols in the sand glowing in the firelight. But now, it was just an empty beach, with no sign of the figures that had tried to harm us. I shuddered. I mean, I never wanted to experience anything like that ever again. But as I drove away from that beach, I knew that I'd never forget the terror of that night, or the strangers who had saved us from it. The cruise had been going smoothly, the gentle sway of the ship lulling me into a sense of relaxation. But then, as I was wandering around the ship, I stumbled upon something strange. I mean, it was a noise, coming from somewhere below decks. At first, I thought it was just the ship creaking, but then I heard it again, louder this time. I followed the sound, my heart pounding in my chest. I mean, or what could be making that noise? I made my way down to the cargo hold, the sound growing louder with each step. I mean, it was like something out of a horror movie, the darkness pressing in around me as I descended into the bowels of the ship. And then, I saw him. A figure huddled in the shadows, their eyes wide with fear as they stared back at me. I mean, I didn't know what to do. I mean, here was this person, clearly in distress, and I didn't know how to help them. But then, as I got closer, I saw something that made my blood run cold. I mean, it was a scar running across the person's cheek, deep and jagged, like they'd been attacked by something or someone. I mean, I didn't know what to think. I mean, who was this person, and what were they doing hiding in the cargo hold of a cruise ship? I tried to talk to them. I mean, maybe they could tell me what was going on. But they just stared back at me, their eyes filled with fear and mistrust. And then, suddenly, they lunged at me, their hands reaching out as if to grab me. I mean, I stumbled backwards, my heart racing as I tried to get away from them. But they were fast, too fast. I mean, before I knew it, they had me pinned against the wall, their hands around my throat as they squeezed, their eyes wild with madness. I struggled against them, fighting for every breath as they tightened their grip. I mean, I thought I was going to die, right there in the cargo hold of that ship. But then, just when I thought I couldn't hold on any longer, I heard footsteps echoing down the corridor. I mean, it was security, coming to investigate the noise. They burst into the cargo hold, pulling the stowaway off of me and dragging them away in handcuffs. I mean, I collapsed to the ground, gasping for air as I tried to process what had just happened. I mean, it turned out that the stowaway was a fugitive, wanted for a string of violent crimes. I mean, they'd been hiding on the ship, hoping to evade capture and escape to a new life. But now, thanks to me, they were behind bars where they belonged. I mean, it was a relief to know that they couldn't hurt anyone else, but the memory of that encounter still haunts me to this day. I mean, it's like something out of a nightmare, the fear and adrenaline coursing through my veins as I fought for my life. But I made it out alive, thanks to the quick actions of the ship's security team. I mean, I'll never forget the terror of that night, or the dark secret that I uncovered in the cargo hold of that ship. But I'm just grateful to be alive, and to know that I helped stop a dangerous criminal from causing any more harm. It was supposed to be a fun ski trip, a chance to get away from it all and enjoy some time on the slopes. But what started as a relaxing vacation quickly turned into a nightmare I never could have imagined. I was staying at a cozy chalet nestled in the mountains, surrounded by pristine snow-capped peaks and breathtaking views. It was the perfect place to unwind after a day of skiing, with crackling fires and warm blankets to keep us cozy. But then, without warning, disaster struck. An avalanche came crashing down from the mountains, burying the chalet in a blanket of snow and ice. In an instant, our peaceful retreat became a prison, trapping us inside with no way to escape. Panic set in as we realized the severity of our situation. The communication lines were down, and our supplies were limited. We were cut off from the outside world, at the mercy of the elements and whatever dangers lurked in the wilderness beyond. As the hours turned into days, tensions ran high among the stranded guests. We banded together, pooling our resources and working together to ration our food and water. But even as we tried to maintain a sense of normalcy, there was an underlying sense of fear and unease. It wasn't just the avalanche we had to worry about. There was something else out there, something lurking in the shadows, watching and waiting for the perfect opportunity to strike. At first, it was just small things, strange noises in the night, shadows moving outside the windows. But as the days dragged on and our supplies dwindled, the sense of unease grew stronger, until it felt like we were being hunted by some unseen predator. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched, that every move we made was being observed by someone or something lurking in the darkness. And then, one night, my worst fears were realized. I was awoken by the sound of footsteps outside my door, slow and deliberate, as if whoever was out there was trying to be stealthy. My heart pounded in my chest as I listened, my breath coming in like gasps as the footsteps grew closer and closer. I knew I had to act fast if I wanted to survive. With trembling hands, I reached for the nearest weapon I could find, a fireplace poker, cold and heavy in my grasp. I waited, my senses on high alert, ready to defend myself against whoever came through that door. And then, just as suddenly as it had started, the footsteps stopped. I strained my ears, listening for any sign of movement, but there was nothing. It was as if whatever had been outside my door had simply vanished into thin air. But even as I breathed a sigh of relief, I knew that our ordeal was far from over. Whatever was out there was still lurking in the shadows, waiting for the perfect opportunity to strike again. We spent the rest of the night huddled together, listening for any sign of danger. And when morning finally came, we emerged from the chalet, battered and bruised but alive. As we made our way through the snow-covered landscape, I couldn't help but glance over my shoulder, half expecting to see something watching us from the shadows. But there was nothing, just the empty expanse of the mountains, stretching out as far as the eye could see. I don't know what it was that stalked us in the night, whether it was a wild animal driven mad by hunger or something even more sinister. But one thing is for certain, I will never forget the terror of that long, a cold night, or the feeling of being hunted by an unseen foe. And though we eventually made it to safety, I know that the memory of those harrowing days will stay with me forever, a reminder of the fragility of life and the dangers that lurk in the darkness. The sun was beginning to set as we ventured deeper into the wilderness, the excitement of the safari tour filling me with anticipation. It was like a dream come true, being out here in the heart of nature, surrounded by majestic animals. But then, as we rounded a bend in the trail, I saw something that made my blood run cold. It was a group of poachers, armed with rifles and intent on capturing the endangered animals that called this reserve home. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. These were ruthless criminals, willing to kill innocent creatures for profit. I knew I had to do something. I couldn't just stand by and watch as they wreaked havoc on the wildlife. So, I decided to take action. I didn't know if I could stop them, but I had to try. I slipped away from the tour group, moving quietly through the underbrush as I tried to get closer to the poachers without being seen. It was like something out of a movie, the tension in the air as I crept closer and closer to danger. But then, just as I was about to make my move, I heard the crack of a rifle and the terrified cries of an animal in pain. It was like a punch to the gut, the sound echoing through the forest as I realized the poachers had already struck. I knew I had to act fast. There was no time to waste if I wanted to stop them from doing even more damage. So, I sprang into action, charging out of the underbrush and confronting the poachers head-on. It was a risky move, but I knew I had to do something to protect the animals. The poachers were caught off guard, their surprise giving me the opportunity to wrestle one of their rifles away from them. It was a struggle. I managed to overpower them and send them running into the woods. But my victory was short-lived, as I heard the sound of more poachers approaching from the other direction. I knew I had to get out of there. There was no way I could take on a whole group of armed criminals by myself. So, I turned and fled into the forest, the adrenaline pumping through my veins as I raced through the trees. It was like a nightmare, the fear and desperation driving me forward as I tried to escape the poachers' pursuit. But then, just when I thought I couldn't go on any longer, I stumbled upon a ranger station nestled deep in the woods. It was like a beacon of hope in the darkness, the promise of safety and security drawing me closer. I burst into the station, gasping for breath as I told the rangers about the poachers and the animals in danger. They sprang into action, mobilizing a team to track down the criminals and protect the wildlife. It was a relief to know that help was on the way, but the memory of that encounter still haunts me to this day. It's like a reminder of the fragility of nature and the importance of standing up for what's right, even in the face of danger. But I'm just grateful to be alive, and to know that I played a part in protecting the animals that call this reserve home. I was on vacation at this all-inclusive resort, soaking up the sun and enjoying the relaxation. But little did I know, things were about to take a terrifying turn. It started innocently enough, with me just lounging by the pool, taking in the scenery. But then, I noticed something strange. There were these guys hanging around, watching me with these intense stares. At first, I brushed it off as nothing. Maybe they were just checking out the scenery too. But as the days went on, their presence became more and more ominous. It was like they were following me everywhere, lurking in the shadows and watching my every move. I started to feel really uneasy. Like I was being hunted or something. But I tried to shake it off, telling myself I was just being paranoid. But then, one night, I woke up to find myself in a strange room, surrounded by these guys from the pool. I mean, it was like something out of a nightmare, the fear gripping me as I realized what was happening. I tried to scream, to fight back, but they were too strong. I mean, they had me outnumbered and outmatched. They told me they were taking me somewhere safe, but I knew better. I mean, there was nothing safe about being held captive by a group of strangers. I knew I had to find a way out. I mean, I couldn't just sit back and let them take me away. So, I started looking for any opportunity to escape. I mean, I searched the room for anything I could use as a weapon, anything that could help me fight back. But then, just when I was about to give up hope, I heard a noise outside the door. I mean, it was like a sign from above, a chance to escape. I waited until the coast was clear, and then I made a break for it, running as fast as I could through the hallways of the resort. I mean, it was like a race against time, the adrenaline pumping through my veins as I dodged past hotel staff and other guests. But then, just when I thought I was home free, I felt a hand grab my arm, pulling me back into the darkness. I struggled against my captor, fighting with everything I had to break free. I mean, I couldn't let them drag me back into that room, back into captivity. And then, just when I was about to lose hope, I heard a voice calling out to me. I mean, it was like an angel, a beacon of hope in the darkness. It was another guest, someone who had seen what was happening and had come to help me escape. Together, we fought off my captors and made a run for it, racing through the resort until we reached the safety of the lobby. I mean, it was like a miracle, the relief washing over me as I realized I was finally free. But the nightmare wasn't over yet. I mean, we still had to alert the authorities and put an end to the human trafficking ring operating within the resort. It was a long and difficult process, but with the help of the other guests and the hotel staff, we were able to gather enough evidence to bring the criminals to justice. I mean, it was a terrifying ordeal, one that I'll never forget. But I'm just grateful to be alive, and to know that I played a part in stopping something truly evil from happening. I was at this theme park, looking for a thrill, something to get my heart racing. But little did I know, I was about to get more excitement than I bargained for. I mean, it all started innocently enough, with me getting on this roller coaster ride. I mean, I love roller coasters, the adrenaline rush, the feeling of weightlessness as you soar through the air. But then, halfway through the ride, something went wrong. I mean, the coaster started shaking and jerking, and I could hear these strange noises coming from the tracks. At first, I thought it was just part of the ride, some special effects to make it scarier. But then, I looked around and saw the other guests starting to panic. I mean, it was chaos, people screaming and crying as the coaster lurched and swayed. I knew I had to do something. I mean, I couldn't just sit back and wait for help to arrive. So, I started shouting for everyone to stay calm, to listen to me and follow my lead. I mean, I didn't know if anyone would listen to me, but I had to try. I mean, it was like a nightmare, the fear gripping me as I realized we were all trapped on this malfunctioning ride, with no way to escape. But then, just when I was about to lose hope, I noticed a maintenance ladder leading down from the track. I mean, it was like a lifeline, a chance to get everyone to safety. I knew it was risky. I mean, climbing down from a moving roller coaster is no easy feat, but I had to try. I mean, I couldn't just leave all those people up there, stranded and scared. So, I started making my way down the ladder, urging the others to follow me. I mean, it was terrifying, the coaster shaking and swaying beneath us as we descended. But we made it. I mean, we reached the ground safely, with everyone accounted for. I mean, it was a huge relief, knowing that we were finally out of danger. But the nightmare wasn't over yet. I mean, we still had to get out, to let the park staff know what had happened and make sure no one else got hurt. So, we made our way to the nearest exit, shouting for help and telling anyone who would listen what had happened. I mean, it was like a race against time, the fear driving us forward as we searched for someone to help us. And then, just when we were about to give up hope, we spotted a park employee heading our way. I mean, it was like an answer to our prayers, a chance to finally get the help we needed. We told them what had happened, about the malfunctioning ride and how we had managed to escape. And they sprang into action, calling for backup and organizing a rescue mission. It was a long and difficult process, but eventually, we were all safely evacuated from the park. It was a huge relief, knowing that we were finally out of danger and that no one had been seriously hurt.